I'm Nicola Ranger and I'm Key Account Manager here at Sustainit, and I'm delighted today to welcome Colin Curtis, Strategy Director from TBL. Colin, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine, yes. Hi, Nicola.
Fantastic. Hello. Thank you. Thank you for that. So on to the agenda for today. After our introductions, when we tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do, we're going to, Colin is going to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. He's going to kick off. Then we're going to share with you some ways of determining which goals are most relevant to your business. After that, we'll talk about setting goals aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, how to use the goals to collaborate with others, and also how you can use the goals to communicate your performance. Before we start, at the end there are going to be some questions, but before we start, I'd just like to do some quick housekeeping. So today's webinar is an hour long and we'll finish by 4 p.m. We've allowed 10 minutes at the end for questions, so you're welcome to post your questions during the webinar here or as we go along. We may not get through all the questions at the end, but we're very happy to answer anything that you want to email to us, and we'll share our contact details with you at the end. Just so that you know, we're recording the webinar, and within the next day or so we'll post the webinar on our YouTube channel, on the Sustainit YouTube channel, and you'll get an email with a link and you can share that or revisit the presentation later if you'd like to. So before we start, a bit about Sustainit. For over 10 years, Sustainit have been a key player in CSR, global CSR data. We started in 2005 and we've been around a while. And so between us, we've got lots of years experience providing managed and professional services to both FTSE 100 and Fortune 500 companies. And as you can see, lots of the companies are there on the screen. Those are the companies that we've worked with. Our services include data assurance, sustainability software selection, implementation and support, as well as advice on training on how to collect your data and report data on all aspects really of environmental, social and governance data. Just to give you an idea, up there it says 68,000 users across the globe. We support thousands of users on various platforms right across the world. We do work with different software solutions and various partners globally, but what we aim to do is remain fiercely independent. It gives us a huge advantage that we can offer our clients what they need rather than having to sell any particular product or system to them. So that's Sustainit in a nutshell. I'm going to hand over to Colin now, who's going to give us an introduction to TBL and get started on today's agenda.
Thanks, Nicola. And good afternoon to everybody. I hope you're all well. So as a brief introduction to myself, my name is Colin Curtis and I'm based in the northwest of England in sunny Lancashire, or for anybody who knows Lancashire, generally known as grey and cloudy Lancashire. So for about 5 years I was the global head of sustainability at an organisation called Dimension Data. It was a very large IT company, and my background before that was in technology. So it's kind of interesting to go and look at how I went from a focus looking at how technology can go and help businesses to actually how we use technology to go and drive sustainability and how organisations can be more sustainable. And I learned an awful lot during the 5 years I was heading up sustainability there. So I spent a lot of time looking at how large companies can go and develop targets, how we go and change organisational culture, how to deal with the myriads of different frameworks that are out there, how to go and collect data and make it work for you as well, and how to go and engage employees. So I now kind of run a small business called TBL Services. TBL stands for Triple Bottom Line. And what we do is we kind of share out the skills I've learned to go and help businesses build their sustainability credentials and importantly go and communicate them. And one thing that I found during that time was that the Sustainable Development Goals are a really powerful platform by which you can go and engage senior executives, you can go and engage clients, and you can go and engage multiple stakeholders. So we very much focused on looking at how businesses can go and use the Sustainable Development Goals to go and improve what they do and to go and communicate it more effectively. So our focus is around building strategies, around developing targets. For the organisations that don't have their own sustainability teams, we provide a management service for those. We focus on reporting, so we provide tools and services of our own to go and help you generate reports that help people tell the stories more effectively. And we also look at business transformation as well. So how businesses can go and look to go and improve the brand, to go and help engage employees, and to go and lower their energy costs. Okay, could you move on to the next slide, please, Nicola? Thank you. Okay, so I'm pretty sure you've probably all come across the Sustainable Development Goals before, as they're often known the Global Goals for Sustainable Development, or even more commonly known the SDGs. I personally have a hatred of acronyms. I wish people wouldn't call them the SDGs. It does sound like something you need to go and see your doctor about. But we do have a bit of a penchant for acronyms in our industry, so the SDGs is what most people refer to them as. For those of you who haven't come across them before, and I'm pretty sure you all have, in September 2015, we had 193 of the world's leaders who agreed to these 17 goals with the United Nations. The goals are really designed around how can we make the world a better place by 2030 in particular. So if we completed all these goals, we'd eradicate extreme poverty, we deal with inequality, and we deal with climate change by that time. So some really kind of, big lofty aims behind all of these. And I think what these have done incredibly well is to go and solve the one problem that I had in my entire time looking at sustainability within an organization, which is to define what do we actually mean by sustainability. I've usually found that if you ask 10 people that question, you'll get 10 different answers. So the goals are quite neatly articulated. Here are 17 individual things that we can go and do, that we can focus on, and if we get the right focus on these, we'll make a difference to our world. And where they particularly are really good is actually engaging people who don't have sustainability as their main job function. So it gives us a vehicle by which we can communicate to executives and get them to go and understand what it is that we're trying to do. A vehicle by which we can go and communicate to the next generation as well. There are people teaching about sustainable development goals in schools. And a mechanism by which we can actually go and communicate to our stakeholders and show what our organizations are good at, and what efforts we're making and what we're actually achieving. So, and the goals were originally designed for government, but the only way we're going to go and achieve these is if the governments get involved, businesses get involved, and individuals get involved as well. We can't work alone. The only way this is actually going to go and work is if we all work together to go and play our part.
Okay, let me move that on for you.
Thank you very much. So when we set up this webinar, we promised 4 really simple steps as to what you can do in your business. If you're anything like me, the first time I saw these goals, I thought, these are really good. These are great, but exactly what are they? Is this a framework like Global Reporting Initiative, GRI? Is this something like ISO 14001? Is this something very different? For those of you who are familiar with the goals, each of these 17 goals have individual targets that sit underneath them. And those targets themselves can be quite confusing because they were designed in the first place for governments to go and achieve. So if you're sat there in your business and you look at those targets and you think, well, how does that relate to me? What do I do with these? So my advice with these would be to first of all go and choose goals that are relevant to your business. Out of these 17, most of these are really, really good. And some of these are going to apply to a lesser extent and some of them to a greater extent. And I'll take for an example, good health and well-being or zero hunger. I'm sure a lot of your organizations are doing some really good work to go and help people and do charitable courses around these. But it's important to go and pick things that are truly material to your business. So, if your business is a high energy business, then maybe go and focus on climate action. Responsible consumption and production is something that affects pretty much all of us. So focusing on that is always going to be good. And I've picked 4 examples on this slide here that maybe you've got a business that wants to go and employ a lot of people, wants to go and pay a fair wage. So decent work and economic growth will be a focus. Maybe wants to go and look at gender equality to actually make sure there is a really good mix of genders within its business, and to make sure that it produces things responsibly and it deals with climate change responsibly as well to go and lower its carbon footprint. So picking goals that are really relevant to your business is going to be key as a first step. And Nicola, maybe if you can add a few things around, how this relates to materiality and assessing materiality within a business.
Absolutely. That's what we've got next. And understanding really around the materiality is important. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept, a key element in reporting frameworks such as GRI or DJSI, and it allows you to focus on what's important. It's about making sure the big issues don't get lost amongst the noise of other sort of less important ones. And as Colin said, whilst it's important to understand how all 17 goals may impact your value chain, it's impossible to focus on everything. So it's not about picking the easiest, most obvious, or the positive ones, but more about picking the ones that are material to your business. I've picked fictional manufacturer as an example here and simply plotted some global goals based on their relevance to the company, and that's along the x-axis, and the external stakeholder relevance on the y-axis. And obviously the size of each circle, as it says there, is a guide to how much is currently invested in this area. So that starting at the top, if you start at goal 12, looking at goal 12 at the top there, that's about ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. And you might already be working towards sustainably sourced key commodities such as palm oil, paper or pulp. But obviously the size of that indicates that you're not doing a lot in that area, but its location obviously indicates its importance both to your company and its relevance to the external stakeholders. So that would be an area that you'd maybe want to focus more on and do some more work on that particular goal, whether it be identifying areas of work that you want to implement, particular strategies that you want to develop, or having more targets or whatever it might be. Some of the other examples that I've given there, goal 13 on climate action, Colin just mentioned that. That might be around greener facilities, and you can see from the example I've given here, I've shown it as a big size, and that means the company's fully invested, or perhaps sufficiently invested, in optimizing the processes to perhaps secure or meet these sustainability goals. Going down, I've identified there goal 3 is around good health and well-being, and that might be around improving working conditions for employees and maybe provide employees and their families with healthcare services or insurance, or it could be to do with helping consumers adopt a healthier lifestyle, for example. Perhaps you're offering a wider range of healthy food choices if you're a food manufacturer, or perhaps even raising consumer awareness about the importance of nutritious diets, or that sort of thing might be an example. I've also plotted some other goals. Goal 5, achieving gender equality. I've indicated there that that particular goal may be of high importance to this company, but at present, again, it's not currently investing heavily in that area, and a target might be to invest in policies and programs which support women in the workforce and encourage organisations in your supply chain to do the same. That would be something else that you could think about. For goal 10, which is about reducing inequality within and among countries, you'll need to consider things that you do regarding production, distribution and marketing. And that's really about making your products more affordable and accessible for consumers on low wages. That obviously is not relevant for every company, but it may be in this example. It could also be around to do with paying staff a living wage, perhaps, or encouraging other companies within the value chain to do the same. And finally, just that bottom one there, I'll talk about goal 8, which is about sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth. So full and productive employment and decent work for all. Again, an area in the example here where they don't currently heavily invest in, but it's an area they deem important, and perhaps prioritising the eradication of sort of modern day slavery type stuff, child labour in your supply chains, those sort of things. So this, and you can see I've plotted some examples, goal 1, 11 and 14 as less important to your company. So perhaps those are areas that you'd pay less attention to. So when you've done this and plotted your materiality matrix, what's next? Really, Sustainit always, post-materiality, suggests performing a gap analysis, because then you need to discover which of the material goals that rate as high you're reporting and progressing on well, and where you're going to have to do some more work. It's pretty straightforward here, but obviously behind this would be all the detail around the data. And it changes the materiality from simply being a tool used to give a particular take on your reporting to actually help you define your strategy. And it'll show you where you need to tighten up with particular processes or programs to support a particular goal, the ones I gave you there, 12, 5, and perhaps 10 and 8. So that's really helping you make a business case to senior managers or whoever you need to show where your focus could be, should be, because those are important, but you're not yet currently investing in them. So now I'm going to pass on to Colin to talk a little bit about setting targets for your chosen goals.
Thank you, Nicola. Okay, I think that's a really, really good example of actually how you can go and select goals and bring them to life. And Nicola, I love the way that you've got everything plotted out on that materiality assessment there, because I think so many organizations look at these goals and think, where do I start? You know, all these are important, but some to a greater or lesser extent, and that materiality assessment is a really clear way of actually understanding which goals are most relevant to you. And I think once you've done that as well, every organization should really go and look at as many of the 17 goals as it can. In most cases, the majority, 80–90% of them, are going to be relevant. You know, I think things like sustainable cities are going to be somewhat confusing if you're a private sector organization, and peace, justice and strong institutions doesn't apply to everyone, but the majority of them are things that we can all go and get behind. But once we've determined which ones are the most material, setting targets is going to be absolutely key. And I understand most organizations have probably got targets anyway. So when you think about setting targets here, you have a choice as to whether you actually go and map your existing targets into these goals, or I would strongly advocate that when you're actually looking at setting new targets for your organization, aligning them to these goals from the start is a great way to go and proceed. You know, you have a framework that's already in place here, and it's a really nice, easy way to go and communicate exactly what it is you're focusing on. So I've got 4 kind of hypothetical targets based on the hypothetical organization I mentioned earlier on. So our fictional organization has decided that gender equality is something that's really important. You know, maybe it has a particular issue on that one, maybe it's something its board members are passionate about, or maybe there is a specific economic instance where it wants to go and level out the gender gap. So, and I would always advocate the setting of very big, very measurable targets that maybe have sub-KPIs that sit underneath it, and maybe even sub-targets below there. But in this case, you know, this organization wants to go and have no pay gap, no gender pay gap whatsoever. It's going to have 50% of its board members to be women by 2025. So, you know, this is a really good, admirable target, and it's well communicated by aligning it against Goal 5. Now, maybe what it wants to try and do is to make sure that it's a high employer, and it wants to make sure that its staff are paid well as well, and it wants to maybe start looking at addressing some of the social inequality issues. So it may look to say that, okay, we want 20% of our staff to come from, if it's a British firm, UK's top 10% of deprived areas by 2025. These are just examples. And responsible consumption and production, I would advocate to everybody here that this is a major goal for pretty much every company out there. My personal view is, out of all the 17 goals, this is potentially the most important. If, as a species, we produced and consumed responsibly, we wouldn't be in a mess. So, you know, this is something really every organization could do with getting behind. So ensuring all products are made from recyclable materials is an example by 2025, or maybe looking at how you can bring the concepts of the circular economy to life within what your organization makes. Or even if you're just a services organization that doesn't manufacture anything yourself, you can actually look at how your services help other organizations go and consume products responsibly. And climate action is, you know, is debatably one of the most important of the 17 goals on there as well. So we all need to be doing our part on this. So, you know, a kind of more typical goal to go and reduce GHG emissions within the supply chain by 20% by 2025. So you'll see with this that this is not necessarily just about looking at your own climate impact, but the climate impact across your supply chain and your value chain as well would apply underneath Goal 13. And Nicola, maybe if you can look at a few examples as to, how software systems can go and help with this.
Absolutely, that's what I've got up next. If I can persuade my computer to change slides, it seems to be being rather slow today, so apologies. Yes, so a little bit from us around using software to support to report against the Sustainable Development Goals. And Colin, I totally agree with you. Whilst I've happily used SDG throughout this presentation for the slides, I try to stick to using the word goals to describe them if I don't want to use the whole phrase, because I rather agree that acronyms don't help if we're trying to get people to understand what these are. Calling them SDGs doesn't promote our cause, let's put it that way. Anyway, so using software. First of all, what I want you to think about is what data you've got coming in that you're going to be able to report against these goals. And at Sustainit, we use 5 buckets for the data. Either that's data you're already collecting or data that you need to collect. And starting off there, we've got the environmental data. This is often where people start. Managing the organisation's environmental data and processes will cover things like air, water, waste, as well as reduction planning, carbon offsetting, emissions inventories, things like that. So that's the environmental bucket. Moving around clockwise, responsible business is often referred to as corporate social responsibility, and it focuses on the sort of community involvement, charitable giving, any kind of community engagement piece, the data around that. It also touches on employee engagement, developing, training, any of those sort of things, and collecting social data, perhaps such as employee health or HR life balance type data. That often is slightly more qualitative rather than quantitative data, but it is often an important part of a software that can collect this data. Moving around to the right, risk and compliance is the next one, and that focuses on business continuity planning, risk and compliance, obviously, management and regulatory change management. Focusing on that risk and compliance side of things is again another key section. Health and safety is about preventing injury at work. It might be about reducing the economic and social cost of health and safety failures. So it's going to be focusing on hazard, incident or injury reporting, as well as the management of that data. It also will encompass the chemicals and risk assessment side of things, with sustainability software solutions, EHS solutions, being able to capture that and give you what you need in a system. The last area I put there as our last of our 5 buckets is supply chain. And that's really a key in around transparency and in disclosing data within your supply chain, as well as delivering change, and that's about, again, reducing risk within your supply chain. It could be about supplier benchmarking or giving feedback and management to your supply chain, as well as the actual compliance side of things and Scope 3 reporting. So those are the 5 buckets we tend to use. And your question might be, why use a software? Well, I'm sure many of you are using Excel or perhaps an in-house built solution. And you trying to map the goals doing this, you can, but it's going to be a struggle, really. And that's where a good software really adds value. In terms of some of the points I've mentioned on the right there, this single consolidated auditable database, when we talk to companies that are using Excel, multiple users are a problem, a challenge, and version control issues, as well as not having a comprehensive validation process. So this adds that using a software allows you to do that and have this single consolidated database. Accuracy and consistency, again, in measuring and reporting, it becomes much easier to compare data across periods or regions. The reporting functionality in the software is so enhanced on using any other system. Support for informed data-led efficiency initiatives. Quickly and easily, you want to be able to see the impact of the programs you run. It's as simple as that. And with your current system, the question is, can you increase functionality? There's all sorts of things around data imports or exports. It's key for things like health and safety reporting. and then really just a little bit about the multiple frameworks that you may need to report to, and being able to map the 17 SDGs. GRI have produced a document mapping these against the GRI disclosure, and it's available on the GRI website. But actually doing that yourself is no mean feat. So it's having a software that will allow you to do that, and some of them are absolutely excellent at this. One I'll particularly mention is FigBytes, because they map it particularly well, but lots of the other big systems do as well. The final two there were accurate and real-time data. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. And finally, some of the things that software can take care of is things like multiple time zones, conversion factors, different languages, and mobile access. They're things that you really wouldn't get if you didn't use a software system. So that gives you a kind of a high level view of that. And what I've put here is, this really is a bit of an unashamed plug, I have to say, because it's all about how do you choose the right system. And we have a free online tool called Go MarketWise. You can see gomarketwise.com in the corner there. And what it really does is just ask you the questions about what you need in those 5 buckets we've talked about. And it gets to the heart of your requirements. And then once you've completed the questions, it will use that information to compare a wide range of software. Some of them are shown here on the screen, the different software options that are around, and it gives you basically solutions that meet your requirements. It doesn't, what you fundamentally do if you need to select a software is build a strong business case and get leadership buy-in, and then do the due diligence process to make sure that you're selecting the right system. So it doesn't do away with that, but what it does do is cut out a huge amount of the groundwork, because what you want to do is find out the most relevant options for you. Really, there are hundreds of software solutions out there, and by just selecting the most relevant options, you can then get free demos via the website, and really it just gives you a shortcut to some of those options and the things you need to talk about. So if you're looking for a solution, then do give Go MarketWise a go. Anyway, what's next is we're going to talk about collaborating on SDGs with partners and clients. So I'll hand over to Colin for that.
Thank you, Nicola. And I've got to say, even though you say that's not a shame and plug, I can vouch for the fact, having worked with Sustainit for quite some time, the knowledge these guys have got around software and what's available is quite incredible. And I think determining the right software to go and use is absolutely key, because there are a lot of systems out there that are very focused on the environment. And if you think of those SDGs, that means they may be very focused on 1 or 2 of the goals. But if you want to actually build a whole strategy that covers all of these, it is really quite important to make sure you've got software that really looks at as many of those 17 goals as you can do, and can actually go and communicate with those in the best way possible. So, to my mind, one of the most important things around the SDGs, and I'm finding myself dropping into acronym mode here again, sorry, the Sustainable Development Goals, is that they provide this common language for people to go and talk about it that's high level. So it's not the language of just data management, it's not the language of reporting protocols. It's a language that you can use to go and talk with your chief executive, or with your son, or with your daughter, or with your friends, or anything like that, and it's easy to go and understand. So for those old enough to go remember, this is the kind of Esperanto of sustainability, but hopefully much, much more effective. So now we've got this common language, I'd advise you all to go and use it as much as you can do. So use it within your supply chain is a great place to go and start. So when you're working with your suppliers and you're quizzing them around what they do and how they can make sure that they're kind of reinforcing your policies and they're upholding your values, talk to them about the Sustainable Development Goals, talk to them about what work they have done around the Sustainable Development Goals in their business. So what is it they're supporting? What is it they're doing? Have they set any targets, and what progress have they made against those? And that's good both from the point of view of understanding what it is they're doing, but it's also a great way for them to go and share ideas back. I've often worked with organizations who've maybe kind of focused on one particular Sustainable Development Goal, spoken to their supplier, and then found out some really surprising things they're doing they've actually taken and put back in their own organization. So working with the supply chain and using the SDGs as a form of alignment is a is a really, really good tool. It makes it much easier for your procurement department as well to go and get the correct language and the correct tools for that conversation. I'd also advocate it for you to go and use it within your value chain. So there was a recent survey done by GlobeScan and Sustainability that looked at how many of the leading organizations are looking at using the SDGs. On the most, the kind of key area they all seem to be focusing on was how can they align their products and services with this. So this is a great way to go and look at what your organization's doing, what products it's selling, and actually to be able to go and communicate the benefits of these products to its clients as well and say that, you know, look, through our products here, we can maybe go and improve responsible consumption and production because we're making sure that our products are fully recyclable, you know, or we support the circular economy. So responsible consumption and production is a great effort for us. Or maybe that our tools are low carbon, so therefore we support goal 13 with climate action. So using the SDGs as a way to go and look at your sales tools, your product development, your services development, your supply chain behind you is fantastic. It's also a really good way to go and develop multi-stakeholder groups. So if you have the opportunity to work with other organizations in your particular sector, getting a chance to go and align around who's doing what around each of these goals and how you can go and share best practices is a really good use of these. So now we have this common language. Getting that alignment is something that's really, really useful. And I think you'll all be developing, you know, your own little practices around this, and you'll all be doing good things. And it's just a matter of sharing them out. So Nicola, maybe if you can talk a little bit about some of the industry collaborations that are out there, that would be great.
Absolutely. So again, move the slide forward if it wants to go. There it goes. So collaborating on the Sustainable Development Goals. Really what I went and did was a little bit about work around which organisations there are out there. I just wanted to give you a few examples. There are obviously hundreds of organisations out there that try and provide a collaboration for companies. It might be individual companies, or it might be not-for-profits, you know, or governments, or a combination of them. So what we're talking about here really is that whilst the software options that we talked about can help you track and share progress, they also allow you to collaborate by giving you that data. And in some circumstances, the software itself collects data across the industry. I haven't given any specific examples here, but that is in some industries what they do. So these are examples of multi-stakeholder partnerships which advance the sustainable development for each of those industry sections that I've mentioned. If we start at the first one, CGAP, it's a consultative group to assist the poor, and it's a global partnership of about 34 leading organisations, and they're seeking to advance financial inclusion. CGAP, they work to develop innovative solutions. That's really what they're all about. They do some practical research and active engagement with those financial service providers, along with policymakers and funders, to enable approaches to that at scale across to advance that financial inclusion. It's evidence-based, and they look to address the issues with the targets that they make. So that's one example. The SAC is the Apparel, Footwear and Home Textile Industry Sustainable Production Coalition. Rather a mouthful there. I understand it was started initially as a meeting between Walmart and Patagonia, I think, which is a rather unlikely combination. But its main focus is on building what they call the HIG Index. Some of you may be familiar with this. It's a standardized supply chain measurement tool, and now it includes lots of different organizations in that coalition, and they work together to measure sustainability performance. To help, really their main aim is to make sure that the industry can address those inefficiencies, the damaging practices that maybe go on, and of course to achieve the environmental and social transparency that they want. That's really key, that they want to deliver to the end consumer, because it's the consumers that are demanding this. And the principle behind the SAC is that together they can address these issues much more than they could ever do it individually. So a really, really good example there of a coalition of organisations that will and are already beginning to make a difference and make those changes. Finally there, the EU Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition, that's a shared commitment. It's based in Africa, and it's around achieving sustained inclusive agricultural-led growth, for want of a bit of a mouthful again. But by bringing together the diverse stakeholders that it includes, both their capacities and their interests. It includes things like African government departments, institutions, the private sector, and development partners, as well as research institutions. They can address the key constraints to build this inclusive agriculture-led growth in Africa. And again, another example of a collaboration that supports these Sustainable Development Goals by its activity. So there are just 3 examples of, ways that we can collaborate on the Sustainable Development Goals. If you're interested in knowing a little bit more about what organisations exist in your particular industry, do drop us an email. I can share some details with you. But bear in mind there will always be several because there are plenty of these collaborations going on across all industries, which is great news for moving towards these goals. Right, so I will now hand over to Colin on sharing the performance.
Thanks ever so much. I think you hit the nail on the head as well. I mean, there's no shortage of frameworks out there, and there's no shortage of organisations through which you can go and collaborate. And the problem is just keeping track of all of them. So it's great that you've actually got access to that information there. And I think you can quite quickly see with those 3 examples as well, just how the Sustainable Development Goals align. Where we've got CGAP, who is really kind of focused around poverty. So, they're doing some great work around Goal 1. And then you've got SAC that are focusing on what you can do in clothing, and NAFN as well, focusing on food, beverage and consumer goods. So those organisations are focused on Goal 12. And I think that's a good example of the way you can see these Sustainable Development Goals coming to life and actually being a good way to go and communicate and help people to go and understand which of these organisations are doing what and what benefit they're delivering. So yeah, nice examples there. Thank you, Nicola. So now we've got this common framework, now we've got this common language out there, we can use it as a communications tool. And probably the smartest thing the United Nations ever did, and the sexiest thing, and that probably is the first time I've ever used the word sexy and United Nations in the same sentence, is they actually made them really nice and graphical and clear and bright and easy to understand. So that means they're excellent to go and use in a lot of your reporting. And because they're so bright and colourful and well understood, it means that your audience should be able to quickly understand what it's about and identify with these as well. One of the challenges I always used to go and have was whenever I used to go and update my executive organisation, our CEO, on what we're doing, was trying to make sure that I was using a language that he was familiar with and that he was comfortable and aware of our sustainability strategy and our progress. And I'm sure there are a few of you there can identify with actually, the difficulty making sure that your executives are fully engaged with this. So being able to go and produce a nice, simple dashboard that's based around these Sustainable Development Goals, with targets that you've agreed behind them as well, with things that are very relevant to your organisation, should do a lot to go and catch your executives' attention. So, in the example here, I mentioned that my hypothetical organisation may have 4 main focus goals of gender equality, decent work and economic growth, responsible consumption and production, and climate action, and maybe have some set agreed targets behind all of these. So that way we can go to our executive every quarter and then say, here's our 4 agreed Sustainable Development Goals, here's the targets we agreed against them, here's the initiatives we're putting in place, and here's our performance against them as well. So it's a nice, simple, consistent, and that word consistent is key, visual way of engaging them around this. And it's great to make sure your executives are on board, but it's at least as important to make sure your employees are on board as well. And if we're using a framework that's, so easily communicable, then tell all your employees about it. If there is a way of making sure that your employees are actually getting a regular newsletter, whether it be on your internal social media platform or whether it's an email newsletter or some other method of distribution, ideally not print, then that way you can go and make sure that they're aware of exactly what your company's targets are, how they align to these sustainable development goals, what these sustainable development goals are, and what the initiatives are you're putting in place, and maybe a few pictures just to go and bring it to life so your employees can understand exactly what it is you're doing around this. And lastly, but definitely not least, your reporting to the outside world is extremely important. And for many, many years, I'm sure a lot of you identify with the fact that you put a lot of effort into producing a sustainability report, and your biggest challenge is getting people to go and read it. And some of that is because occasionally these sustainability reports can be quite complex. So GRI and things like that, although they're important, actually does mean that these reports can get quite big and quite difficult to read unless you're very familiar with the topic. So I'd always advocate to go and use something like the Sustainable Development Goals, make it really simple. So go and say, what are you doing around poverty? What are you doing around hunger? What are you doing around your main focus goals that you've set? What are you doing around gender equality? Because that way, somebody doesn't need to go and have a background in sustainability to go and have a look at what your organization's doing and feel engaged and impressed with it. And ideally, if you can make this on your website and put nice, big, bright graphics on your website that show all your data and show all your performance in a way that's updated regularly, it saves people having to go and download a big PDF and look through it and understand what GRI indicators are and UN Global Compact clauses and these kind of things as well. They can literally just see, what are you doing around climate action? What are you doing around gender equality, etc. So probably the best use to me of these Sustainable Development Goals is as a communications tool. So I would definitely very much recommend using them where you can do in your whole communication strategy. Nicola, maybe if you could use a couple of examples as well as to how the software tools can go and support this.
Absolutely, yes. I'll just move on slides. And what I've done here is just create and mocked up an option in terms of using the goals with infographics, because really it is about using these goals to communicate performance. As Colin said, what we want to do is, as well as the newsletter, dashboards and things like that, it's often engaging with your employees or even the end users, and having a good way of communicating with people that is eye-catching. Definitely eye-catching is key. You want to engage those leaders, employees, clients, industry peers, and infographics with simple figures inspire much more than any of those long sustainability reports that Colin was talking about. If you're not already using infographics to communicate data, I wonder why not, but I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. They really are compelling and attractive to present to people. They can be easily scanned and viewed. People understand them reasonably quickly, and it's that intrigue as to what that picture and that number means that gets people engaged. They need to drill that a little bit further, read that sentence explaining it to understand what it's about. So they offer an ideal way to communicate, whether it be an international communication, so across language barriers, these work really well. And really the thing that I want to say here when I relate it back to the software is about the value of infographics in presenting live drillable dashboards. That's something that a few of the software solutions do, not all of them, but a few of them, the biggest ones certainly. And it means that you can drill down into the data to get some more information. So often, an example I might, reduction in regional water consumption, if I take that one there. On a live drillable dashboard, you would be able to click into the 8% on Africa and go into the regional changes of the data over time and understand the actual data and get back to a more basic understanding of where the data came from. And that's a real key if you want people to engage with the data. It's about bringing it to life and making sure it's telling a good story that you can communicate with your end users. I think one of the things that we find often with companies that we work with looking for a solution is helping their end users, the people who are actually submitting the data into the system, understand why they're doing it and where it's going. And if you can reflect back that data, you can really help that engagement piece. So as well as the external reporting, it's really, really important that you're able to communicate performance to your end users as well, and that's something these software options really offer. It's the ultimate really in infographics if you can make it a drillable dashboard in your EHS or your CSR system. A live drillable dashboard is pretty much as good as it gets when it gets to software. So this one I've mocked up to show you an example of how you can present the data, but a really good system would allow you to have something similar live, showing you exactly where you are in terms of the data. So that's it from us, unless there was anything else, Colin, you wanted to add at this stage. Otherwise, I think we're moving on to questions.
I think the only thing I would add is that you've got some fantastic graphic design skills there, Nicola. You're missing a vocation. It's a very good mock-up. I like that.
Thank you, Colin. Hours spent colouring things in, what can I tell you? Right, so next one is questions. And really just to remind you that the question button is just on the right of your screen. You'll see it about halfway down. And I can see we've got a question there. So this question here, let me have a look and see if I can see who it's from. It's from Julia, and she says, what are the main challenges businesses can face when they start using the sustainable development goals within their strategies? So Colin, I don't know if can you give us a bit of enlightenment as to what challenges businesses might face when they start using the SDGs?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. I like that one. I would say probably the main challenge is actually a bit of a change in mindset. I think for so long we've all gone down the same route when we set a strategy, that we generally come up with 3 pillars. It's probably people, planet and products or something like that. I've done the same thing here. I'm not always quite sure why our strategies have pillars, but generally they do. And then we set targets and we set goals and then we report on certain things, and generally because sustainability is not a mature industry, it's debatably not even an industry at all, we're evolving over time, and we've started to evolve things in a particular way. And really what these sustainable development goals are doing is they're making us think of it in a slightly different way. So probably the biggest challenge is actually going from the way that we've been used to doing it for so long to looking at things slightly differently. You know, certainly when I first came across them, I was like, oh, blimey, not another framework. I could do without this. We've got GRI, we've got we've got EMAS, we've got ISO 14001 and all these different ones. Why do we need this? But that's not what it is. This is more aligned to a strategy than anything else. And it takes a little bit of changing the way you think to be able to go and view it as such and realign what you're doing. And particularly as a lot of organizations set a strategy and put it in place for, 3, 5, sometimes even 10 years, transitioning to using the Sustainable Development Goals as a strategy and using it to set targets, etc., does take a bit of a mind shift. And I would say that's probably the bigger challenge for organizations. But once you've made that shift, it's really not too hard and it can be very helpful.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful, Colin. I can see another question here that I'm going to pass to you, which is from Chirang Agni. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And they've asked if you can suggest ideas to communicate the Sustainable Development Goals when your company welcomes them but haven't yet set goals around them.
That's a very good question indeed. There are lots and lots of really good tools out there. One of the nice things with this being such a well-recognized and well-focused on framework is that there are an awful lot of tools out there. So there are some websites I would recommend. Globalgoals.org is a really good one. Provides a lot of media resources where you can download some of the graphics. WBCSD, which is the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, has put a good CEO pack on there that provides videos and provides guides for everyone. And there are also guides even to go and communicate with your children as well. My favourite one that I like is Big Goal Small Smurfs. That's the URL. I'll double check and make sure it's sent out after this webinar. But believe it or not, we actually had the Smurfs doing a whole campaign around how to go and make the SDGs famous, and it's one of the best communicated SDG campaigns I've seen out there. So there's lots and lots of resource around there. But if you've not set targets around the goals within your own organisation, maybe just include it in your regular sustainability communications. So Put something out to your employees just to say, hey, this is something that's out there. You know, all the world leaders are behind this. A lot of other big organizations are getting behind this as well. We support it. You know, our organization is behind it, and here's some resource to go and look into it. And just really do everything you can to make the goals famous.
Yes, and can I just add to that, Colin, that the UN on their site have got lots of downloadable graphics, and you can have anything you need to support communicating the goals. They really, I haven't got the URL in front of me, but they really do have a sort of good resource library of bits and pieces that you can use if you want to. For example, in our office, we have a giant poster up because we felt that was a good thing to have on the wall to remind everybody. So resources like that are easily available. And it's really just about communicating, you know, that first step about what they are and what they're trying to achieve. So yes, that's great. Thank you, Colin. I'm just looking. Well, yes, this one's similar. Could the Sustainable Development Goals be used in order to communicate my sustainability strategy? And if so, could software solutions or digital tools help me produce a compelling report? Great question there. I think that's probably a bit me and a bit you, isn't it, Colin, that question?
I think it is. You want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So software solutions and digital tools, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, those software solutions, if the goals are important to you, then selecting your software system based on a solution that already maps those goals would be really, really sensible. That said, globalreporting.org has got GRI linkage documents, as I mentioned earlier, so that you can always, sort of practically every one of the solutions that we deal with has an ability to report on those, the GRI. So, you know, that being able to map from there is relatively straightforward if you have a system that allows you to report on those. In order to communicate your sustainable strategy, Colin, that's much more up your street, that bit of the question. My addition to that is really around, if you haven't aligned your strategy, sorry, I'm not supposed to ask you a question, am I, Colin? But anyway, if you haven't aligned your strategy to the goals, can you still use them?
If you haven't aligned your strategy to the goals, can you? Yes, you can. So my turn for a shameless plug in this one. This is what my organisation is set up to go and do, which is to go and help businesses go and look at how they can either align their existing strategy to the goals, or if they're creating a new strategy or don't have one, then how they can use the goals to go and set those strategies there. So it can be done. It's really not hugely complicated at all, but it's definitely something we can go and help with, because there are some quite structured steps you can go through, and we've got quite a methodology to go and help organisations go through those steps to work out either how their existing strategy links in with these and how then best to communicate it, or to go and create a new strategy based around that. So yes, you can, and that communications aspect of it, I think, as you mentioned there, it's really, really key. So there are ways to go and do that, either if you have the existing software, or even if you don't have the existing software, there are ways to be able to go and tailor your report so that the Sustainable Development Goals stand out and are well communicated to all your internal and your external stakeholders.
Sorry about that, forgot to unmute. I've got one last question from you, from Daniel, is, do you think, this is kind of an opinion piece really, do you think it will be possible to achieve all the goals by 2030? That's quite a big question.
Oh, that's a big one. I'm a firm believer in shooting for the stars and hoping for the moon. If you don't go and have big goals, you'll never get anywhere whatsoever. I remember chatting to a lady called Vanessa Wellgreen, who was the head of sustainability at Danone. I don't know whether Vanessa's actually on this call. I always thought she had the best name for anybody in sustainability, having a surname of Wellgreen. And I remember her telling me a story of kind of setting targets and spending an awful lot of time researching what their targets should be and taking them to their chief executive. And I think they mentioned, I forget the exact figure, but saying that we feel that we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by about 17%. Well, that's great. Let's set a target to go and reduce them by 40%. And she was like, oh, we can't do that. And it's like, well, what's the point of setting a target we feel we can achieve? You know, so again, don't quote me on the exact figures, but I believe they set a very high target and they didn't quite get there. but they got 80% of the way there, and they got further than would have been the case if they'd have set a low achievable target. And coming back to your point, Daniel, I think there is very similar is true with this. There are some very, very big targets in here. I personally, I'm not sure we'll achieve all of these. I'm a little bit of a realist, and I would love to think that humankind is going to go and, you know, keep warming down below even 1.5 degrees by 2030. But it's not looking that likely, particularly with Donald Trump pulling out the Paris Climate Change Agreement. I think a lot of the other issues we've got going in our world are extremely big, and I would love to see all the goals being met around those, but I'm not that confident. But it's down to us to go and try. You know, and I think history's shown that if we all try our best, then we can achieve things that we never really expected and go and surprise ourselves. We've only got to go and look at recent election results, both good and bad around the world, just to realise that things aren't quite as predictable as we think. So, I also think as well, you know, the one word I would say is that it's easy to think that these big goals are actually the domain of governments. In truth, governments don't really do anything much. You know, governments simply set frameworks. It's businesses like yours that make all the big difference. So focusing on these goals can perhaps go and achieve more than we can realise. So, you know, I'm not sure we'll get there, but I think we can really kind of give it a very good go.
Great, I think that sums it up nicely. I like the comparison for the shooting for the stars and we'll hit the moon. I think that's exactly it. I don't think we hit all the Millennium Goals, but it set us well on the way. So I think that sums up how we feel about it very nicely. So I think that's it from us. Really, I just got one more slide that says thank you and shares with you our contact details. As I said at the beginning, what we will do is publish our webinar on the YouTube channel. Just search for Sustainit and you'll find the presentation along with all of our other ones. And it just remains for me to thank Colin very much for his time today, and also to say thank you to Julia, who's been supporting us organising this webinar, and to say goodbye from all of us here at Sustainit. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye now.